Settle in. Let your body rest and your breath slow as we begin our gentle drift back in time. And warriors of endless intrigue and of a society layered with duty, honor, and hardship. It is a world often romanticized, painted with images of graceful samurai, stoic castles, and silent, shadowy figures darting between the trees. Tonight, we will wander the misty landscapes of feudal Japan, a time of lords, but beneath the surface of these elegant tailies. But by treading the muddy paths walked by the ordinary, the expendable, and the overlooked, was a harsher, grittier reality. Imagine the cool dawn mist curling around a distant battlefield, and prepare to step softly into the worn sandals of a man whose life was both fleeting and forgotten. We will explore that world, not through the eyes of the famous or the fortunate. Our journey begins on the lowest rungs of the samurai order. Your gear is rudimentary, a simple breastplate, often little more than layers of hardened leather, perhaps a steel cap that barely protects your head. If you're lucky, a half-decent spear or naginata is in your possession, though it may well be nicked and worn from previous use. Not as a noble warrior draped in silk and steel, but as an ashigaru, a foot soldier. For though war is often remembered for its battles, the ashigaru knows that most days are spent not fighting, but waiting. Waiting for the next march, which could span miles under the burden of gear and exhaustion. But on bare earth, beneath a crude, hastily made shelter of reeds and cloth, pushed forward into the melee, shoulder to shoulder with men just as fearful, just as determined not to be trampled or skewed, disposable and all too mortal. So close your eyes if you wish, to wear them down and, if possible, to overwhelm by sheer numbers. The clang of weapons, the grunt of effort, the dull thud of bodies falling, these sounds become the rhythm of the fight. Segment 1. Why it sucked to be a samurai foot soldier. Imagine. If you fall wounded, you are simply left behind. It beats down mercilessly, turning armor into a suffocating oven, to whatever fate comes next. But such tailies are rare. More often, you remain one among the many, nameless, faceless, a fleeting presence in a warlord's ambition. You awaken not on a mat of fine tatami in a serene Kyoto estate. Only the churned mud of battlefields, where your footprints and your fate are soon erased by the march of others. The air is damp, chilled by the morning, heavy with the earthy scent of trampled grass, damp mud, and the distant smoke of campfires. The groans of the injured murmur faintly in the distance. Day after day, you march. You wait. You fight. You huddle close to what little warmth you can find, your muscles aching, your mind replaying the flashes of violence from the day. You are ashigaru, a foot soldier conscripted or hired by a local warlord. There is no gleam of polished armor here. To a clan whose fall became one of the most tragic stories in samurai history. If supplies are running low, and they often are, perhaps a handful of pickled radish, sour and sharp, is all that's left to break the fast. Clothing is rough-spun hemp, stained from wear, patched and threadbare in places. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is a thin porridge of rice, watered down and barely filling. Your belly is rarely full. Around you, hundreds of other men stir, stretching stiff limbs, muttering quiet curses about the cold, the hunger, and the endless waiting. Waiting for orders. Waiting for the enemy. When the battle does come, it is no noble affair of duels and honor. You are a body in a sea of bodies. You hold your spear upright and brace it forward, squinting through the press of bodies and the chaos of shouts. There is little glory here. Victory means survival, nothing more. Injury is a death sentence in itself, for few will carry you from the field. The ashigaru were famously expendable, trained in mass formations, used to bolster the ranks of the samurai proper. Their purpose was simple: to absorb the enemy's advance. At night, after a skirmish, the camp returns to uneasy quiet. Fires burn low for fear of drawing attention. Sleep is shallow, often interrupted by the calls of sentries or the sharp cry of a fox echoing through the woods. And then comes the march again, across muddy roads, along forest paths tangled with undergrowth, through villages half abandoned by peasants fleeing the tides of war. Rain? It soaks you to the bone. Sun? But beyond the discomfort, there is a dull sameness to it all, a rhythm of hardship. You may fantasize about rising in rank, about distinguishing yourself with courage, perhaps catching the eye of a commander. And if death comes, it is swift, often unnoticed. There are no songs for the Ashigaru, no scrolls of painted glory. Yet still, because in feudal Japan, the wheel of war turns ceaselessly, and men like you are the ones it grinds beneath. Now, let us leave the ranks of the weary and the worn, and turn instead to the higher echelons of power. Let us step quietly into the fading banners of the Takeda clan, and witness their slow, in Segment 2, the fall of the Takeda clan. The mist lifts, and you find yourself not among the ranks of foot soldiers now, but on the rolling plains of Kai province, surrounded by banners painted with the emblem of the Takeda clan, the crimson sun on a white field. This is the realm of Takeda Shingen, the Tiger of Kai, one of the most formidable daimyo of Japan's Sengoku period, the era of the Warring States. Shingen's name carried weight, a strategist, a warrior, a lord of great renown. But as we begin this part of the journey, the banners hang heavier. The days of glory, of fearsome cavalry charges and triumphant conquests are slipping into memory. The Takeda clan is beginning its slow, painful fall. His code of governance was just and orderly, his army fiercely loyal. His son, Takeda Katsuyori, inherited the mantle. His territories prospered under strict yet fair control, and his rivals, particularly the Wesugi clan, kept at bay through brilliant campaigns. The advisors who had counseled Shingen watched with concern as Katsuyori pressed forward, eager to expand, eager to prove himself. Sometimes too eager. The rise before the fall, Shingen built his reputation on the battlefield. His cavalry, swift, disciplined, devastating, was the envy of other clans. But, as with all things in history, strength invites challenge. Shingen's death in 1573, under circumstances still debated, perhaps from illness, perhaps from wounds sustained in battle, left a void. Nobunaga and his ally, Tokugawa Ieyasu, have fortified their position, a castle defended by wooden palisades, and an innovation that will change warfare forever: arquebuses, the early matchlock guns. Katsuyori, however, was no Shingen. Though brave and ambitious, he lacked the careful prudence of his father, and standing in his way was a growing power: Oda Nobunaga, a ruthless and innovative warlord with eyes on unifying all of Japan. The rhythm of the march, the anticipation of collision, the road to Nagashino. The palisades prevent the cavalry from breaking through. The terrain is muddy, treacherous. There is nowhere to maneuver, nowhere to escape the barrage. The veteran generals, men who had served under Shingen, exchange glances of uncertainty. Their new lord is bold, but is he wise enough? It was in 1575, 2 years after Shingen's death, that the Takeda clan's fate was sealed on the fields of Nagashino. Imagine the camp before the battle. The soldiers still wear the red banners, still recite the prayers for victory. The enemy, they know, is formidable. Katsuyori, perhaps blinded by tradition, by pride in the cavalry that once made Takeda armies unstoppable, orders a direct assault. And so, the men advance. Picture it, a sea of red banners, horses snorting, the thunder of hooves stirring the dry earth, the shouts of warriors echoing through the valley. His forces are scattered, his family in danger. Surrounded, abandoned by many he once led, Katsuyori flees with his wife and child. Peasant uprisings, rival claimants, and the encroachment of enemies all converge. There, knowing the end is near, Katsuyori performs the solemn, ritual act of seppuku, suicide by his own hand, preserving a shred of honor in death where none remained in life. But then, the faded ink of old scrolls, the rhythms of military strategy studied even centuries later, a crack, sharp and alien, the sound of gunfire. It was a story of transition, from the age of swords and spears to the age of gunpowder and cannons. Rank after rank of Takeda warriors fall, cut down by volleys of lead. The Ashigaru you once marched beside are now fodder. The samurai fall too, pride and armor offering no shield against this new, unrelenting force. By day's end, the Takeda army is shattered. Those who survive carry back the bitter news, not just of defeat, but of a death knell for the clan. The slow collapse Katsuyori's authority crumbles. His allies desert him. His retainers begin to doubt, to waver, some even defecting to rival clans. The territories once firm under the Takeda flag splinter. By 1582, just 7 years after Nagashino, Katsuyori's position is untenable. At the Temple of Tano, in a small wooded valley, he takes his final refuge. His wife and child perish alongside him. With their deaths, the Takeda clan, once the terror of the Central Plains, is extinguished. The weight of legacy, and yet, the Takeda name lingers not only in the annals of history, but in the quiet places where memories reside, the stone remnants of fortresses. Their fall was not just a tale of military miscalculation, a moment when the old ways, brave, noble, and flawed, began to give way to the cold logic of new warfare. And as the winds stir the grasses over the fields of Nagashino, as the banners rot into the soil, the echo of hooves fades, leaving only the whisper of history. But where the samurai stood openly on the field, another figure of Japan's past is cloaked in shadow. Let us now step quietly into the murky world of the ninja, to sift through myth and reality, and see what truth lies beneath the black hood. Segment 3. The Enigma of the Ninja. Myth versus reality. Let the clamor of the battlefield drift away. The sounds of hooves, of gunfire, of clashing steel grow distant, replaced by something quieter. The rustling of leaves in a dark forest, the soft drip of water from a hidden spring, the hush of wind, threading its way through the tall grass. You find yourself now in shadow. Not the noisy, frantic shadow of war, but the quiet, heavy shadow of secrecy. This is the world of the ninja, or more properly, the shinobi, figures who have long lived in the space between truth and legend. Popular imagination paints them vividly, clad in tight black garb, masks concealing their faces, scaling castle walls under the cover of night, brandishing exotic weapons like throwing stars and grappling hooks. But the reality, as far as historians can uncover, is subtler, quieter, more human. The shinobi were not, for the most part, trained assassins leaping from rooftops. They were spies, scouts, infiltrators, men and sometimes women who operated in the margins of society. Your appearance is unremarkable, even forgettable. This is your disguise. The shinobi's true purpose. Imagine yourself, perhaps, not as a black-clad warrior, but as a simple merchant, a farmer, or a monk. A length of rope, a small knife, lockpicks perhaps, powders for distraction, or small mirrors for signaling. Practical items, easily hidden. The goal was to gather intelligence, to sabotage, to quietly undermine the enemy, not to engage in direct combat. Disguise was their greatest weapon, passing as a tradesman to gather information, as a laborer to gain access to enemy encampments, as a servant within a castle to overhear whispers of betrayal. Manuals such as the Bansei Shukai, written in the 17th century, compiled the knowledge of generations of shinobi, methods of disguise, codes of secrecy, ways to read weather patterns, even the art of breathing silently. The shinobi were masters, not of flashy acrobatics, but of blending in, waiting for the right moment to act or to retreat. They carried tools, certainly, but not so much the fantastical gear seen in stories. Their weapons were often improvised. A sickle or a short sword, yes, but often used only if absolutely necessary. The schools of ninjutsu, the Sengoku period, rife with shifting alliances and intrigue, was their heyday. Certain regions became known for their shinobi. Chief among these were Iga and Koga, provinces nestled in forested mountainous terrain, their geography perfect for hiding and training. There are no parades, no songs, no titles bestowed upon the shinobi. If you are caught, death is near certain, perhaps preceded by brutal interrogation. If you succeed, no one may ever know your name. These regions developed traditions of ninjutsu techniques of stealth, evasion, and survival. To know that your greatest victories would leave no trace. You've noted which gate is least guarded, which walls have crumbled slightly from disrepair. You slip away before dawn, information folded into your mind, ready to report back to your master. Into the polished wood and paper walls of a daimyo's castle. Imagine the quiet discipline required, practicing how to step without breaking twigs, how to move through water without a splash, how to sit perfectly still for hours. It was a life of patience, observation, and constant risk. Shadows in history. The shinobi appear most prominently in the service of daimyo during Japan's fractious periods of civil war. Clans like the Takeda, Oda, and Tokugawa employed spies to gather intelligence on rivals, to disrupt supply lines, or to sow discord within enemy ranks. Perhaps you have crept into an enemy castle, disguised as a servant. You've listened to drunken retainers speak freely. And yet, your work is never recognized publicly. The myth takes shape over time, as the Sengoku period gave way to the relative peace of the Tokugawa shogunate. The real shinobi faded, replaced by stories. The image of the ninja we know today, masked figures hurling shuriken, vanishing in puffs of smoke, is largely the product of Edo period folklore, embellished through kabuki theater, woodblock prints, and much later, modern media. The reality was far more mundane, and yet perhaps more fascinating. To live in constant deception. To master the art of becoming invisible, not by cloaks or magic, but by being thoroughly, utterly unremarkable. Such was the paradox of the shinobi, celebrated in story, but forgotten in truth. And as the night deepens, let us leave these shadowy forests and winding trails behind. Let us ascend once more, not into the wilderness, but into the structured, rigid world of power. There, among the rituals of court, the delicate formality of tea ceremonies, and the careful maneuverings of politics, we find another kind of silence. A quieter, colder world of control and hierarchy. Segment 4. Life in a daimyo's castle. The forest shadows fade. Now you find yourself at the base of a high stone wall, its surface cool and rough to the touch. Above, wooden eaves curve gracefully, layered like the tiers of a mountain, each painted with the faintest sheen of lacquer. The castle stands not as a home of warmth, but as a fortress of order. This is the domain of the daimyo, a feudal lord, master of provinces and retainers, sworn to the shogun yet ruling his domain with near absolute authority. You cross the moat on a wooden bridge, its planks worn smooth by the passage of countless feet, samurai in heavy armor, servants with their heads bowed low, messengers hurrying with sealed scrolls. The water below reflects the gray sky, rippled by the gentle drift of koi fish and the occasional falling leaf. Once inside the outer gates, the mood shifts. The air is still, muffled by the thick walls and carefully raked gravel. The castle grounds are laid out, not just for beauty, but for defense. Winding paths that confuse intruders. Gates that force you to turn and expose your side. Watchtowers that observe every approach. Walls of shoshi, thin paper screens, slide open and closed with a hushed whisper, revealing rooms of tiny mats and sparse furnishings. But beyond the defenses, a rhythm of ritual and hierarchy defines every moment of life here. Your every movement is dictated by etiquette, how deeply you bow, when to speak, when to remain silent. The quiet order of castle life. Imagine yourself within these walls, a guest, a servant, or perhaps a lower-ranking samurai. His time is governed by strict schedules, morning audiences with advisors, the review of reports from distant holdings, deliberations on tax collection, military readiness, alliances, and grievances. A simple scroll hangs in the alcove, its calligraphy offering a seasonal reflection. A flower arrangement, sparse and intentional, sits quietly beside it. The floors are polished wood, cooled beneath bare feet, creaking ever so slightly with each careful step. At the castle's heart sits the daimyo himself, surrounded by his closest retainers. Even here, the hierarchy persists. Where you sit, how you hold the tea bowl, the angle of your bow, each gesture signals your rank and understanding of propriety. Servants move like shadows, carrying tea, records, and correspondence, their presence acknowledged only in passing. Silence is not just preferred, it is expected. It is a subtle theater of power and poise, a way to cultivate alliances, display cultural sophistication, and reinforce one's place in the social order. The art of tea and power. Occasionally, the stillness is broken by the preparation of the shonu, the Japanese tea ceremony. Retainers whisper in corners, jockeying for influence, mindful that any misstep could result in exile, or worse. This is no simple refreshment. It is an art, a meditation, a display of discipline and cultural refinement. The air carries a chill, tinged with the faint scent of cedar and smoke from distant kitchens. The tea room is small, intimate, walls of clay and bamboo, a floor of woven mats. The air infused with the faint aroma of fresh tatami and the earthy scent of matcha powder. Conversations, if they occur, are whispers behind closed screens. The women of the castle, wives, concubines, daughters, play their own roles, often navigating a subtler form of politics through marriage alliances, patronage of the arts, and the careful management of the household. The tea master, often a respected artisan, prepares each movement with deliberate care. The cleansing of the tea bowl, the measured scoop of green tea, the gentle whisking into froth. They patrol the corridors, their armor gleaming faintly in the soft light, their expressions impassive. Yet even they are part of the hierarchy, a chain of command that links every soul in the castle to the lord at its center. Every guest observes, seated with composed stillness. The tea ceremony offers the daimyo more than a moment of respite. The politics behind the screens, but beyond these quiet ceremonies, politics swirl like an unseen current beneath the surface. Letters arrive from rival lords. Emissaries seek to discuss marriages and treaties. Spies report murmurs of rebellion or unrest. Even the daimyo's family is ensnared in these webs. And then there are the castle guards, samurai tasked with ensuring the safety of the lord. Nights in the castle. As evening descends, the castle grows even quieter. Paper lanterns glow softly in the corridors, their light flickering gently with the draft. Guards remain at their posts, but the halls grow still. The daimyo retires to his private chambers, where scribes read reports by lamplight, and servants prepare his bedding, layers of soft futons laid meticulously upon the tatami floor. And so the castle rests, suspended in its rhythms of power, duty, and quiet vigilance. It is a world apart from the noise of battle, yet it is no less burdened by tension, a life lived under the constant gaze of expectations, of honor, of the ever-turning wheel of politics. Now, as we conclude our quiet journey through feudal Japan, let us drift gently back to the present. We have marched as weary foot soldiers across muddy fields, stood among the ruins of a fallen clan, crept through shadows with the elusive ninja, and walked the polished halls of a daimyo's castle. Each layer of this world was bound by structure, by hardship, and by ritual, a delicate balance between violence and tranquility, survival and ceremony. And now, here in the stillness of your room, your breath steady, your body at rest, the past begins to fade. Only the softness of your pillow remains, the quiet comfort of the present, and the slow, sure pull of sleep. Good night, traveler of history. Sleep well. Inevitable collapse.